Since someone around here is always talking about the intellect, I think it's about time to face up to a real question. That is, how can you be sure that the intellect exists? All right? Follow me. You can see and even feel, but you can see muscles. You can hear music, and you can visually, sensually partake of all sorts of artistic manifestations of other people. You can, without any doubt, feel someone else's emotions. You can feel someone else being angry. You can feel someone else being sorrowful. But how do you know for a fact that the intellect exists? Let me suggest one possible way to start looking at this, where I was going to try and turn your attention. How about a kind of a little cute form of that good old uncertainty principle? Remember of Rabbi Heisenberg? What if the intellect is non-existent until it is either used, or at least its presence or absence is noted? That its existence is non-existent until in some way it is literally called into play or called under the light, pulled under the light of some sort of scrutiny, of someone noting to themselves or to someone else that they cannot seem to get their intellect operating to a way that the current circumstances would be satisfying, or else they may state, correctly or not, that, well, yes, here's what I think, or here's what I decided to do, or here's what I did do. Or, without any specific comment, the other possibility, the third one is, it is simply used. But beyond all of that, back to where I started the little setup, God forbid we call it a premise, but the setup. Everything else that would seem to be, that is an observable manifestation of man's nervous system, can sensually, can directly, through feeling somebody's muscles, through feeling of a statue, through hearing, through tasting of a gourmet meal, all sorts of abilities that people have, the many talents, everything from the physical manifestation of the human organism to the emotional. Because I don't want you to think that there was any doubt that the emotions are as experiential to another person, or as real to another person, as one person's muscles are, their muscular development, their height, the size of their nose. You can directly experience and observe, and it's not in question that the person physically exists, and they physically exist in a particular way, such as they're fat, they're thin, they're strong, and they exist emotionally, because you literally, without any doubt, can feel someone else being angry. You can feel someone else being terrified. But how about that far end, that other arbitrary division of the nervous system into the intellect? It was not just a cute question I started out with. How can you actually know that the intellect exists in anybody? There they stand. You can look and see whether they seem to be in good shape, whether they're muscularly developed, whether if it's a woman, whether she has an attractive figure to you. And if the person is standing there perhaps sobbing, that here it is, it's a big old strong, tough looking guy, muscular guy, and it's crying. And so you can see that the guy's got muscles, and he can be crying in such a way that you have to go, oh, stop it, God, I'm going to feel it. But if I say, all right, how do you know that the guy has an intellect? Now at that level, at that three-dimensional level, you can get a microscope, you can get your binoculars, you can stand, you can peer like on the bow of a ship, you can try and feel in some way, smell, listen, do anything you want to. How do you know for a fact that the intellect exists? Specifically, if you want it in another person, but the better question is the general one I started with, how can you know that the intellect exists? And to recover it again, now that I've wrapped up some of you people's attention over toward a certain pathway, how about that good old, don't take it literally necessarily, but the good old uncertainty principle, recall it, under the auspices of quantum mechanics, that at the subparticle level, that you can't really locate where a particle would be and its velocity, that you can't have it both ways. In a sense, it doesn't even exist until it is measured, until some human observer takes the time to go, well, let's take another look down here, let's look at the new plates we just pulled off the accelerator and see. And it's only then that it exists. And that is, I know, spooky enough to some people intellectually at the ordinary level. But now consider, beyond all of that, does the intellect actually exist until it in some way is measured, that is, noted? Well, let's get real specific then. Does it exist in you until it is operational? All right, I'll give you some partial hints, if not proverbial type responses to my own question. Everyone's heard the term that has to do with, I guess, everything from your sexual equipment to your artistic abilities about use it or lose it. And probably somebody said that about your mind by now, encouraging older people to stay intellectually active and etc. Okay? Use it or lose it. That sounds to be applicable over a wide range, perhaps almost an indeterminate range of human activities. But let me tell you about the intellect. All right, first I'll tell you that it's more than that, and then tell you that it's more than that, because it's not simply more than that in some linear direction. But with the intellect, it's not simply a matter of use it or lose it. It's this: either use it or you don't have it. Well, I'm glad to see some of you can take a damn hint. That's what I said. I was trying to give you some sort of hint as a kind of response to my own question of how do you know that the intellect exists? And then to ask you the musical question, is it possible that it does not actually exist until it is noted? Or back to the parallel right quick with particle physics, that until it is measured, until it is actually located, it has no location. Until it is spotted, it's nowhere. And then it's right there. But then you've got other problems. How about the intellect? If you're not using it, forget losing it. I mean, that may be serious enough with your sexual parts. I'll leave that to you. But this, and I'm not saying it's not true with ordinary people to say, all right, use it or lose it. It'll deteriorate. Use your muscles or they'll deteriorate. But with this, it is not simply, you can't stop there and say, well, use it or lose it. All right. That's good enough for ordinary people, which is, of course, meaningless, but that's good enough for ordinary people. But enough of you laughed, I'll do it one more time. What if it is this case? It's not simply a matter of use it or lose it. It's a matter of either use it or you ain't got it. That you have no intellect until it is being used. How about a step further in some direction? If you're not thinking, you're not going to think. How about a variation of that? It's not possible that you're going to be thinking better under better circumstances. But now see, everything other than in the intellectual realm, if we take my old arbitrary, artificial, but sometimes useful division of the organism of contemporary thinking man and refer to the general classifications without being mystical whatsoever as the motor aspects of the nervous system and the whole entity of man, and the kind of limbic system that would seem to be the emotions, and then that which seems to be unique to the cortical dry part of man's brain. At the lower regions, the older regions of just the motor nerves, the motor skills, the motor activities, and the limbic, they all seem to have promise, without any doubt, whole promise, that what you might do now, without any doubt, if you do it properly, just halfway, will have some sort of additional payoff tomorrow. That is, if you practice, take up tap dancing enough, and got some sort of native ability, got at least more or less 2 feet, and that you have some control over the 2 feet and some basic sense of rhythm, that you can practice tap dancing and be better than you were the first time you tried. Or that you can lift enough weights, and if you start off and your bicep is 5 inches, if you try real hard you might get up to 7 or 8. It'll almost happen in spite of yourself. Or that if you stop eating, you'll lose weight. And it would seem to be in the ordinary world that if you in some way actually applied yourself to trying to overcome what might seem to be to you unrewarding emotional responses, that the promise seems to be there that you could, through going through analysis, through trying to talk to yourself, through taking some sort of course, trying to exercise some kind of willpower, that I will not be so angry, or I will not be so self-pitying in life. All of these things would seem to hold out, without any doubt, some promise. That trying to develop that which might appear to be quite manual physical skills, such as exercise, or those that might seem to be of a more artistic nature, that if you have any nascent talent for drawing, if you really practice, you can draw better than you started. But how about this? Now at first you might say, well, that's whole true too, because as a child I didn't know nothing, and now I know something. I know the multiplication tables, and I know some things about speaking good English that I've learned. Being educated, learning anything, multiplication tables or the rules of English grammar and rhetoric, is not the same thing as thinking. It is, thinking is no more knowing the multiplication tables than it is having big muscles and being healthy. Because you could have worked your biceps up to 2 or 3 times the size they were when they started and be dying of lung cancer. I admit it's a kind of a running battle probably, but it could happen. Or you could learn to tap dance while being one of the world's great paranoia schizophrenics. You could be a great artist, in fact so good that you might not even stop at 1 ear, you might cut off 2 ears. So you can have all of this, and you can say, well, I know all kinds of information. I have memorized 3 levels of Trivial Pursuit games, or all those questions. But that is not the same thing as thinking. And I will repeat, if you're not thinking now, you're not going to think. And I know in the 3D linear world, as is oftentimes the case, that's insane. Probably put in its best light, it's insane. that just because you're not thinking now doesn't mean that you're not going to think. That's like saying, well, if you're not exercising right now, you'll never exercise, which is silly. If you're not trying to control your temper right now, you'll never do it. All of that is ridiculous. So to say that if you're not thinking now, you're not going to think, that too is ridiculous. That's your opinion. If you're not thinking now, you're not going to think, because whatever it is you're doing now, if it's not thinking, that's what's going to pass for thinking later. Because you will take it as thought now. You'll take it as thought if I say if you're not thinking, you're not going to think. You think, well, I agree with that. Or you think, well, I don't agree with that. Or you think, well, that doesn't make any sense. Whatever it was, see, that's what you got. And that's what you're going to call from now on thinking. If I had the ability to jump into your little brain right then, it's all right. What's that you're doing now? That's not thinking. You didn't listen to me. And your brain will say, I am thinking. Then if you could really hear, I'd say, okay, for the sake of an argument, let's call this thinking. Now, face up to this. Do you realize this is the best you're ever going to be? Then, if you had the ability to see something every now and then, your little brain folds up there might go, oh my God, you're right. You know, that's it. It is not in some way going to get better. This is not a perfect parallel, but if I got to make it real crude, no matter what you may have done exercise-wise in the past, if you sit down now and you try and work your way up to be the poster boy for a couch potato campaign, you do realize if you just sit there, no matter what you've done in the past, you are not physically going to improve your muscle tone. If you just sit down, although you may have been playing guitar for years and years, and if you finally sit down and lay your guitar in your lap and look at it or hold it in your arms, and you sit there, press it to your little bosom, you do realize you're not going to get any better on the guitar. Whatever is passing for thought now, if you're not thinking, but whatever it is you're doing, if that's it, then that's it. Because if you're not thinking now, you're not ever going to think. It's real good to go back and be able to clear things up to so many people's satisfaction. Well, the variation may be you're not ever going to be a better thinker under better circumstances. That, without any sort of direct verbal analyzation, is the tacit impression under which most people are wired up to operate. That if they were pressed, or if they were asked directly about their intellectual wherewithal, or their intellectual promise, or the importance of being able to think and be intelligent, everybody would say that sometimes they're more intelligent than other times, and etc. The point being, they believe that at times, because of the conditions, I can be more intelligent. Either I had more encouragement, or either less pressure was on me, I had more reason, necessity was pushing me like a mother, and that I might be able to think better. You cannot think better under better circumstances. All right, I'll press on, since it is a holiday. If you're attempting to get away from the ordinary humdrum routine of old world thinking, of being tied to the gravity of this planet, to the gravity of your own nervous system, thought-wise, then you have got to be constantly attempting to use the intellect. Not to sit there and say, well, I do. Everybody does. That's what the damn dialogue is. That's what being alive is once the intellect has been fired up. But that is not thinking. That is not all that's possible. If you're going to be a real traveler, a real explorer, you have got to continually be attempting to think, because what you're attempting to do is to use it. And by so doing, when you're doing something other than whatever it is you were doing right before now, then what you're doing is you're attempting to continually recreate the intelligence. You're attempting to continually reestablish it. You are continually reinventing your own intelligence. But if you don't do it, you sit there and it would be not dissimilar to your muscles going through a predictable state of petrification. That is what happens to the intellect, but people do not notice it because the intellect, once it is fired up, it is not noted with people that a person, somebody else, let's make it easy, that somebody else's intelligence gets better or gets worse. Now you may know somebody that went away and came back 5 years later and did get their master's degree, and they can show it to you, their PhD in physics or chemistry, and you go, wow. But there is no notice taken because there is no noticeable change in the thinking ability of people. Somebody you went to high school with that you've got some impression of their thought processes, their ability to be intelligent. You can go back to your 10th reunion, 20th high school, 25th, and they're the same. They may now be riding in a chauffeured Rolls. They may now have a PhD, but they will be as intelligent. Their intelligence will be the same as it was. Now that I pointed it out, if you went back, you would know what I'm talking about, that he's the same guy. Well, what do you say? He's certainly not the same guy. He's probably put on 40 pounds and lost 30 or 40 ounces of hair on his head. He may be now either less aggressive than he was in high school, or he may be more aggressive. In other words, there may apparently be some change in what seems to be the tempo of his emotions. But intellectually, he's going to be the same. So once you take some note of it, the ability for people to think does not change, and therefore there's no note of it. It is not measured. And I'm not talking about an IQ test. It is not measured. It is not noted in the normal intercourse between humans. Because I started asking you, part of the suggestion was that people do not even know for a fact that intelligence exists until it is either noted by its absence or presence by someone, or it is actually in operation. Other than that, nobody knows. It's never thought about. And so not knowing, it certainly there's no notice taken of, boy, you're a lot more intelligent than you were the last time I saw you. No, they're not. Of course, you're not wrong because you never had occasion to say that. That sentence, as common as it sounds, I can't think of anything other than some deranged, perhaps wartime conditions. If somebody is so drunk that it didn't matter anyway, that any one person ever told another one, you're much more intelligent than you were before. Well, it sounds all right, but you ever heard anybody say it? No, I mean, I say things like, well, you're smarter, or you're got a better education, or you speak better, or all kinds of things. You look better, but you think better, because it doesn't change. The subject does not arise. Now, to attempt to do this, the subject has got to arise. And it's not through a matter of education, as you know by now. It's not through a matter of some mental tricks, trying to improve your memory. It is a matter that you are continually having to recreate, to reinvent your own intellect. And the only way to do that is by continually trying to think. And if you're not trying to think, then what you're doing ain't thinking. Now, if you're ordinary, you'll say, well, yeah, it is. And then I have to say, yeah, okay, you got me, you're right. Because I can look right at you and I know what you're doing, you're thinking, so you caught me. I was trying to put one over on you. But if you're not trying to think, then you're not thinking. It's that simple. There is, in a sense, no reality to macrobiotic, macro particle reality in your brain unless you're trying. Because if you're trying, then you're attempting to locate it, or you're attempting to ascertain its velocity. That is, that reality at that level does not exist because it's not operational unless you're trying to note it. And the only way you can try and note your intelligence is to try and think. Because you can't turn on and say, well, how am I doing? If that's all you're going to say, I'll tell you how you're doing. You're doing just like you were before. And And you're doing just like you're going to be doing. That is, if you're not thinking now, you ain't going to think. I told you that. What you're doing now is what you call thinking. That's all you'll ever call it. That's what you call intelligent. You have to continually be trying to reinvent your own personal intelligence, not anybody else's. The only way you can do it is by continually taking note of it. And when you do that, you are making some attempt then. You got no choice. You just have to, if you don't hear what I'm saying, you have to just press on. I started to say trust me, but Jesus, would you trust me? I wouldn't trust me. If you take note in any way that you try and measure, you know, hell with Heisenberg and all that stuff. Where am I? Where is my thinking? Where is my intelligence right now? And at what speed is it operating? Tell me I can't find its location and its velocity. Of course, then you realize, well, hell, you can't find either one. Under ordinary conditions, forget both. Until you do that. Until you do that. And then you are reestablishing, reinventing, you are recreating intelligence. And if you're not doing that, you're not intelligent. What's going on in you is going on in everyone. What's going on in you is not that dissimilar to what's going on in your liver, kidneys, and pancreas. It's the same chemical reactions of the brain that's going on in everyone. It's just that in a casual way of speaking, we can say that everyone's wiring system is slightly different. So that in your lifetime, almost everyone you meet long enough to realize that they have some intelligence, that is, some apparent personality, that they do not seem to be exactly like somebody else you know. They may physically resemble somebody else, but you never meet anybody that, my God, forget your looks and all that. Inside, after talking to you, you are, I mean, you might as well be this other guy I know, this other woman I know. By attempting to note it, by attempting, you could even take the approach by attempting to see whether it is possible to be aware of the existence of intelligence. By doing that, you are, for the first time, or you are in a way that is not ordinarily used, you are noting, you are pushing, you are reestablishing the intellect. A handful of things that keep popping up from some of you people's notes and things I hit on during these felonious hit-and-run episodes of some of these subjects. So let me see if I can't fool you and tie them all together tonight, a handful of them. One of them is this. Is you shouldn't be attempting to solve any secondary problem more than twice. Wait, that ain't all. It's a long sentence. You shouldn't be attempting to solve any earth/secondary problem more than twice, or to even think about it more than 3 times, if it appears relatively certain to you that you presently can't solve it. So I want to see if I can repeat the whole thing again. You shouldn't attempt to solve any earth secondary problem more than twice, or to think about it more than 3 times, if it appears relatively certain to you that you cannot presently solve it, or if you prefer, that it seems relatively certain to you that it cannot presently be solved. How about that? Extract you from it. Well, thank you. That's my privilege. That would seem to be not only highly questionable in a reasonable world, would it not, but it would almost seem to be in some way in conflict with what I just spent all the opening minutes here talking about. That if you're really going to think, you wouldn't let stuff get you down. Or if there's a problem, by God, you deal with it. You either take that sucker and whip it, unless you've still got 5-inch biceps, I guess, and it's a 6-inch problem, but to deal with it. If at first you don't succeed, press on, think about it some more, try a different angle. But consider the full impact of what I said. If it seems relatively certain to you, and I'm just leaving it to you, if it seems relatively certain to you that the problem cannot presently be solved, then you should not try and solve it more than twice, or to think about it more than 3 times. Because if it seems relatively certain to you that it cannot be solved, and I'm of course talking to you people, I'm not out here talking on the Sermon on the Mount to humanity, and so I'm assuming that you are actively being intelligent. If it seems relatively certain to you that right now this problem is not going to be solved, and you've already tried it twice, forget it. It is more than a waste of time if you're attempting to do this. It ranges all the way from being debilitating to being really dangerous. And it's more than just a waste of time. It keeps you landlocked. It keeps you earthbound to deal with things, whatever the problem. I didn't go into details. Anything you won't call a problem. Of course, all we're doing is saying anything that life has told you that this is a problem. Of course, you didn't hear where it came from, remember. You went, God, what a problem. Of course, back on earth, back in the city, oftentimes that in itself seems to be the vexillium, the proof that I am intellectual, that I can what? Identify a problem. There it is. No, right next to that turtle. No, not. There is a problem. And maybe somebody else goes, well, no problem. I hadn't even thought about it. Oh, yes, that's a problem. And I discovered it. I'll admit that was somewhat of a sidestep, but that passes for intelligence. It's not much of a sidestep. Go hear important lectures. Or if you're more efficiently inclined to use your time, I guess turn on PBS on TV and watch debates and serious discussions of serious people with credentials, and what they talk about. It's always the same thing. Oh, I know they say, well, it's world affairs or it's economics. Well, what do they talk about? Problems. That's how you know you're serious. And you can tell, you can tell the difference. It's not serious if suddenly they're going to do some sort of after this serious discussion of newsmen, politicians, ex-cabinet members, and they discuss this problem for an hour. In case you lose track, then if maybe you went to the bathroom, you came back, and they're doing some kind of retrospect of Soupy Sales. Then, and I've never seen the man, no offense, but I've never seen the man be serious. Not even intelligent, right? And one way you know, not just because he made you laugh and he's got a funny looking face and tries to look funny. No. It's because I have never one time heard him discuss a problem. Never heard him bring it up. So just in case, I don't want you to get confused if you were to feel like I advised you to turn on PBS. So that's one way you tell. Back to the problems. Things are wired up in such a way that we've been through this many times, that part of being ordinary, part of, in fact, being, having the appearance of being, intellectual is to be able to identify, think about, accept the fact that there are problems. And if you're going to think about a problem, if you're going to accept the fact that somebody says, do you realize that there's now very good leading statistical information that shows that the greenhouse effect is about anywhere from 2 to 6 years ahead of the schedule first proposed and accepted by the National Science Institute in 1983? You go, no, I didn't know that. Oh, well, let me think about that. That is part of being an ordinary earth intellectual even. Now what can this person do if there is a problem, the greenhouse effect? Now, I'm not questioning that they think there is, that they can measure it. Is this person going to solve it? Now you people getting this on tape, maybe that just for the first few times at some other time or some other place may find this at first blush to be silly, if not misleading, or any other adjective that you'd like to whip on it, but it is not. Because you might, your own wiring system, your own intellect right now might say, well, that's silly. One man cannot solve the problem. Okay. So remember I said that if you're going to do this, and if it's relatively certain that you can't solve the problem after 2 tries, then stop. So you're going to say, in this case, the looming, threatening greenhouse effect, that this one guy that hears about it can't solve it by himself. It's just silly. All right, so we do away with that. So there's no problem with him trying to solve it twice. Even though I'm going to try once, because he knows he can't do it alone. So then, the other part of my original directive with this paragraph, if you can't solve it after 2 times, stop. And if it hadn't been solved after you thought about it 3 times, forget it. Now, as a decent, civilized, perceptive, intelligent person who once has some interest, whose attention is had by the greenhouse problem, and they may know the first part of my directive, well, I'm not going to try to solve it because I can't solve it alone. But by God, I can think about it. I could go to a debate. I could write a paper on it. I could read somebody else's paper on it, and I could write to the guy who wrote that paper, add my opinion, or criticize his. Although one man may not be able to stop something like that, he can think about it. He can talk about it. He can make proposals. He can try to wave the red flag to get other people's attention. That's part of the process of life. That is part of keeping things churned up and growing on this planet. But I am telling you, if you were intelligent in another way, you would not try. Now, I've given you outside figures, of course, as always, trying to make it as easy as possible. If you're relatively certain that the problem's not going to be solved by you, whatever it is, after you tried twice, and I gave you the maximum, because I'm hinting to you that if you were really intelligent, well, now wait a minute, don't think that I was going to hint just once. If you're really intelligent, you wouldn't even try something futile once. So it's not just cut it in half and think, yeah, if you're really intelligent, you're about to hint that you wouldn't wait to find out that you tried twice and couldn't solve it. The first time you tried and couldn't solve it, you'd stop. Well, that's really smart. Yeah, you maybe Opryland smart, but that's not intelligent. If you were intelligent, you would be relatively certain before you even tried to solve the problem that this problem is not presently going to be solved. So at least you would not do it twice. And the part about thinking, to think about it over 3 times. If you're a little more intelligent than I'm even hinting that would be indicative of someone who followed my directive, how about cut it in half? How about twice, okay? How about cut it down again? How about the whole thing is there seems to be a problem, and you hadn't tried to solve it yet. You first think about it, and you think about it one time, and what your intelligence tells you, that is, you're thinking about it, is that presently nothing I do, nothing I know of, no attempt I make will solve it. I wonder if it's too late to blank, play hopscotch, go bowling. Is the movie still on? You see? How about if you got narrowed down to, don't worry about making a futile attempt to solve it twice, or to make 3 attempts to think about it. Doesn't it sound a bit more applaudable that if you could just think about it one time, and it seems relatively certain to you that presently the problem cannot be solved, will not be solved by yours truly. Think about it one time, not even 3 times. Don't make a futile attempt twice. Make no attempt. Don't make a futile attempt. Of course, there is a reason why everybody on this planet makes futile attempts, because at the planetary level there is no difference between a futile attempt and any other kind of attempt. We've got to turn the tape over. Being overcome suddenly with something or other. How about one of the forays right quick into just everyday, what would sound to be just hands-on operational life? Because I do happen to know of this one place. I'm not going to tell you where it is, but there is this place, and there are creatures, again, not completely dissimilar to human life. And again, I got to point out to you, what I'm going to describe does not exist absolutely in parallel to what is the situation here and the possibilities here, but enough so that what I'm telling you is not ill-stated. And it's this, and I'm having to apply things here such as us humans apparently making futile effort, thinking about things that your thoughts turn out to be impotent insofar as any outcome. Right? Everybody understands that. Right? Taking that, and although it's not the exact situation, but I know this other place to where what we would call, if we were there, what you would want to call, if I could just show you, you'd want to call futile efforts. The place is arranged in such a way that no one ever does that. But it is not in some way, I'm not trying to hold it out and tell you, but boy, what a great place if I could take you there. Because if you went there, if I could take you there, with all of the baggage that you are now, your nervous system, you would find it a very irritating place. Believe me. Well, some of you laugh. Sometimes I ought to get good and stop. I'm just fooling because I know what's going on, but for the rest of you, it's to stop and say, all right, why'd you laugh? Of course, I would hope that some of you would tell the truth and go, got no idea. No idea at all. So I'll assume that at least one of you would have said that, and I feel better about it. Remember, there's not an exact parallel. I'll say one more time. And I'm saying you that for a reason. It's not some sort of cop-out, and it's not to take the edge off of this, but just remember that. But it would be like this. The kinds of things in your life that happen that seem to be problems to be solved. Your business just overnight goes down the drain. Or the company you work for, you show up tomorrow morning and they're out of business. The man or woman you've been living with and relatively satisfied, you'd become habitual in your arrangement for the last 10 or 12 years. You come home after going and find out your company's kaput. You go there and he or she's gone. All that kind of stuff. Do you understand? I said I was going to make it real hands-on. Don't just laugh, because this is not exactly applicable here if you're only listening with 3D intelligence. But I want to show you how irritating it is just to think about it. These creatures, if that sort of thing happened, and they get no warning, we're at the same place, the whole kind of smear that would be true with you, they don't want change, they're relatively satisfied with their job, they build up a pension, they're retiring in another 8 or 10 years, they drive downtown, they walk or to where the place is, they pull up, and the whole place is just wiped out. There's just a big old hole, and there's a sign say, kaput. The ZTY Corporation, kaput. And they walk and look. All right, now here's what you're faced. Listen quick, because this is not the way things are on this planet, but listen to me. They would look to take this unfair parallel, a non-perfect parallel. They look and they immediately understand, as I hint to you, is possible here on this planet, they understand that there is nothing. Nothing. I mean, you don't have to think about it. If you're intelligent enough, you look and you realize there is nothing I can do it's not just that they pulled up and said we're temporarily closed to restructure our financial base. Because then you might think, well, and it says all of our employees are temporarily laid off. So you might be hired back, right? Or if it just says closed by order of bankruptcy court, you might think, well, they might get restructured and be rehired and all that. But let's say you just drive up and it's like a bomb crater. The whole company's just gone. The sign says, we're gone. You know, that's it. And you look, what else is there to do? I mean, it's a guy, this kind of creature. If they're not tied up with this kind of wasteful, futile effort, is he maybe going to go, ooh, this can't be true? And so he jumps in his car, or I'm not going to tell you what they call him there, but his little vehicle, and he drives back around the corner, kind of like in a movie, and then goes, oh, it's got to be a bad dream. And then drives back like he's going to drive up and go, phew, it was an illusion. I just didn't see it. I don't know what happened. If this creature's intelligent enough, it knows that I am in the same kind of condition, what you'd call sane. I'm in my same condition I've been all my life. There's a hole there. There's no doubt about it. There's nothing to think about. Driving around the corner, going back home, getting in bed, trying to set the alarm clock back, getting up, putting on my clothes again, driving down here is not going to change. This place is gone. This place is history. I'm out of work. That company is not going to be here again. Not in my lifetime. Maybe it announces, we will never be back in business, so forget it. And it says, we're serious. Sign the ex-board of directors, or the ex-DUI corporate. All right. So this creature is not going to waste any effort. Forget about me having to tell him, don't try to solve this problem more than twice. Solve what problem? I mean, what's to solve? But here's what else. I would not have to tell those creatures, all right, don't even think about it more than 3 times. What's there to think about? Do you know something I know? You're going to tell me how to think and this is going to go away? It sounds silly, right? Ridiculous. How about futile? Well, yeah, except when it happens to you. All right, now, right quick, do I have to? All right, I will. I started to say, do I have to push it this directly? Ordinary intelligence, I might be hearing this, might say, well, all right, I hear a little of what you're saying. Of course, ordinary intelligence, I can imagine anybody's ordinary intelligence say they're hearing a little of what I'm saying. If they did, it would scare me to death. But if they did, they'd say, well, wait a minute, you're just saying that there's nothing that the intelligence can do right then to solve that, but that's not going to stop people going away and worrying about it. Boy, you got me there, didn't you? Well, that's not the same thing as thinking about it more than 3 times, is it? Well, no, it's not. Well, sure, if somebody'd be upset. Okay, what do you mean by upset? Well, you just can't look at it and turn around and drive off and forget about it. Okay. But I know a place where you can. I know a place where they do. If you were there, that may sound good. It may sound good to some of you that something terrible will happen. That your loved one does run off and leave you or something. And you think, well, that sort of thing has happened to me several times in my life, or deaths in the family. And I've tried to talk to myself. I've tried to talk to ministers, a psychiatrist. I've tried to all sorts of things. And that kind of thing, I keep thinking about it. I'm not enough that it's going to drive me nuts, I don't think, but it is annoying. It's just, it's part of life, I guess. But I know a place where they do not try more than times to solve a problem that cannot, they're relatively sure, be solved. They do not think about it more than, sort of, I'll say once. Because they got to look at the whole and read the sign that says, we're out of business, everybody's fired, you won't get your back pay, you can't find us, and we'll never be back in business in your lifetime, Bunky. Sign the ex-board of directors. All right, so you could say, if you want to, that this creature does think about it once. He reads it, all right, got it. What else is there to do on this strange planet I'm telling you about? Now, any of you who, as I started to say, that you might, in your weakness, temporarily think, well, boy, I'd love to be there, to where you don't worry about the inevitable, or you don't worry about things that can't be changed. if you were suddenly to drop there with ordinary intelligence, you would not like it at all. You would find it very, may I say the least, may I suggest to you, you would find it very irritating. And you wouldn't necessarily know why. I guess after a few days or hours you'd come up with some reason. Like, these bunch of people, bunch of heartless bastards, either that, or I don't think that they're mentally balanced. Oh, really? Why is that, I wonder? See if you can find the connection with this. Back to at least a piece of my paradigm of the wet and the dry brain, of the dry brain being like that thin atmospheric charged cover over the wet sphere of the chemical non-speaking brain. Everyone remembers the many times and many ways in which I brought up the trying not to think the thought that's on deck, not letting yourself continue to take the dialogue, continue to take things that are said in your head as being you. That you turn around and see somebody and inside you make some slur, just some voice just comes out, at least in your own head, about somebody, racially, religiously, sexually, all that doesn't matter. That's just so that you know what I'm talking about. Or you just in general, you just turn around and somebody comes too close to your car and inside your head goes, fuck you, that kind of thing. And I point out over and over that it's not a matter in the beginning in some way of stopping that, which is the kind of first story that life puts out to people that, well, if you were a better person, if you were more intelligent, if you were a better Jew or Christian or Muslim or whatever, you wouldn't have yourself under control and you wouldn't think that stuff. Hell, the Pope thinks that stuff. Everybody thinks that stuff. Not necessarily he knows it. Not thinking the thought. In the ways in which I used to kind of tell you that if you were good, you could turn away and look and not think it. Or you could take it as being like a hungry, relatively feral tiger down in your own nervous system. It's always making noise. It's like you got it behind a closed door if you find out what I'm talking about. But it's not a matter of saying once and for all, shut up, or in some way being able to wrestle it down. But it's a matter that the noise and you are not one. Well, a lot of you remember the many ways I brought this up, but now let me get a little more, or attempt to get a little more specifically your attention. But not thinking the thought. You could see it as a kind of method that you're attempting to keep the dry brain on the move across the expanse of the wet one, to make it continually move. And thus you have got an awareness of the many other possibilities down there in that chemical ocean, the many other possibilities of words, of thoughts, other than that particular one that presently is trying to arise and be clothed in words. That it's not a matter of trying to suppress that one. It's a matter of being aware that, well, that one's there. That one's hollering, fuck you, to just strangers. But that's not all that's going on in the wet brain. And I don't care how limited may have been your education, your experience, it doesn't matter. Life is more complex. The flow, the part of the primal flow that you get in your own nervous system is much more complex at any time. The dry brain is not even the ballpark. It's not even, we can't measure. I made up little examples a while back trying to give you a relative idea of the dry brain trying to express what's going on in the wet. Now, so it would be like an announcer trying to give a play-by-play of whatever figure I made up of 3,000 baseball games going on simultaneously and 2 or 3 dozen football games and then those 1 or 2 rugby matches. And I pointed out that that is part of the basis of the idea of there being a subconscious mind. It is simply that you have more energy, there are more possibilities in everybody's brain. Now at the nonverbal level, there are many other possibilities at any specific time. That was just a small example of what you could be thinking, that is, it had words on it, so that you said, well, I'm actually thinking this. Whatever made me do it, my brain is thinking, I'm thinking this. No matter what it is, there are many possibilities of things you could be thinking other than that particular one. That is an example of not thinking the thought. Not trying to suppress it, not arguing with it. It's just one little white cap amongst an almost countless number of little white caps bubbling around down there. A little bubble arising from this soup, but there are all kinds of bubbles. There's just one, and it seems to be the closest to suddenly coming up and in some way grabbing the electrical side of your brain and putting this chemical movement, putting it in clothes, that is, in letters, in sounds, and suddenly you thought it. And you either approve of it, you disapprove of it, you decide to think about it more. It was just one possibility. As long as we're in this area, let me wrap up a whole bunch of stickiness. You should not let the dialogue become a monologue in you. That is, you should not lose an awareness that there is an apparent difference between the talker, the speaker in you, and the listener. That there are two voices going on. All right. When you're thinking, you think it's you thinking. Under ordinary conditions, unless you're really applying yourself to try and find the reality behind these kinds of maps and sketches and paradigms, you do not take it normally that you are internally engaged in a dialogue. If you're thinking about a problem, as far as you're concerned, you're thinking about a problem. You may think about it one way, and then you may look off. You may try and consider it, you think, from another direction. There is the propensity already built into the general wiring system of everyone for this dialogue, for this bipolar flow of energy that makes noise, for it to be taken as a monologue. Now, if you think that this is too obscure or too metatomical, consider this. All you got to do is push it a bit further in the ordinary world, and that is what life has always judged to be and labeled, with man's participation, as fanatics, are simply people that pop up in life's general wiring structure that to a greater extent than I am saying is a continuing possibility and danger to someone doing this for your dialogue to take on the appearances of a monologue. Those who are considered fanatics, which the only difference between them and people who are considered crazy is fanatics get some power, but the hospitals are full of people like this, is that internally, it's not described like this in psychiatry, of course, or in other means, but it is to them as though the voices, the dialogues running in them is one voice. It doesn't matter whether they say, well, God's talking to me or fate's talking to me, that doesn't matter. But the real fanatics throughout history, not just the motor fanatics, not just the nonverbal Attilas, if we're going to consider Attila was nonverbal, but the ones in more modern day, those that seem to be able to whip up crowds with words and then do dastardly deeds. Or even if they don't get around to that, there just seems to be a danger that they can whip up prejudice and hatred. And they're denounced as being a fanatic. The person's nuts. They are just absolutely just one track about something. about some religion, some race, some territory, something. It doesn't matter what. That which the majority of life is wired up to denounce as dangerous, fanatical, is in that person that the dialogue to them is a monologue. But also, if I may point out to you again, there's an attraction because there seems to be a kind of certainty. It's not psychological, it is still chemical and electrical. But they're operating as though the dialogue has almost become a monologue in them, and that they can move in a direction that seems to internally have little opposition in them. And it's denounced as being fanatic and dangerous, and yet there's a kind of fascination, almost like people rushing out that they hear there may be an atomic meltdown here with this plant. Used to it was people ran to fires. Would holler, "Oh my God, how terrible!" And people just stand and smile, and they'd call their brother or somebody, "Hey, come down! That big old warehouse is burning down!" And people would get out of bed in the middle of the night and run and watch a fire and get as close as they could. Now if they heard there's going to be a meltdown, the whole thing may blow up and destroy this end of the United States, are people going to stay home and try to crawl under the bed? They'll get up, throw on some clothes right quick, and they'll drive down and get as close as they can. They'll do that, many people will, with fanatics. And they'll even do it while standing there and holler, "The man's an idiot. This guy is dangerous." And they'll say, "Do you know where he's speaking next?" Now back internally though, there is the built-in propensity. It comes and it goes, it's worse and then it's less, for people to take the dialogue as a monologue. Stickier still. See if you can hear this. Even though you need to continually be aware, to take note, and to not let just the apparent difference between that there's somebody talking to me and then somebody that listens. You're not wired up to feel it that way, but you'll say something. That is, you apparently think something, and then you'll go, "Well, no, I can't do that now." And you take it as, "Well, I'm still thinking." No, it was a dialogue. Somebody said, "Well, let's do so and so. You know what we should do? We ought to cut down on all the sugar we've been eating." And that's when you're just fixing to reach for some sugar for your coffee. And you go, "Well, all right. Well, it's already at 9 o'clock at night. I'll start tomorrow." That's a dialogue. And you can say, don't fall for it again, that I don't talk to myself. Everybody does. The system talks to itself, or you would not be conscious. So you need to note and not even lose the awareness of the apparent difference between the speaker internally and the listener. Now, the stickier part. But you should also note, while not letting the dialogue become to you a monologue, also note that the dialogue, though, is monophonic. Since so many people like for me to use, it's a talk, according to all the cards and letters I get. Half of them say, "Get out of town." No, half of them say that they like me using as metaphorical springboards, particle physics, and then the other half say they wish I would use more references based upon the allusion to audio systems. I don't know why, but... So even though, while not letting the dialogue, unbeknowingly to you, slip into being a monologue, you should still note that the dialogue itself is monophonic. That is, the left and the right channels, that is, the speaker and the listener, are both fed from the same source. It just appears to be stereo. That is, it appears that, yes, there's someone talking, not you put that way, and someone listening. Because I'll say, "Well, I'm going to cut down on sugar." Okay, starting tomorrow. First thing tomorrow. Okay. And then I might even, while I'm getting out, "Well, that's pretty chicken shit to say that it's 9 o'clock. If I'm going to stop, why don't I stop now?" "Well, I've already put 1 spoon in my coffee. Why am I going to throw it away and waste the coffee?" See, ordinary people, they have let the dialogue, if I suddenly jumped in their brain and said, "Did you hear all this stuff I was talking about, this nonsense?" They go, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, right now, you're letting the dialogue become a monologue." They go, "Oh, give me a break. It's just me thinking. I was weighing the possibilities of it. I should cut down on sugar or just cut it out for a while." And I agreed I would. And then I thought, well, it's 9 o'clock at night, and I was about to have one more cup of coffee. I just got through having one with 5 spoons of sugar like I always do. So what difference does it matter now? I'll start tomorrow. I decided I was going to start tomorrow. And if I said, yeah, but now you're taking this as being a monologue. You think that this is a non-ending, an uninterrupted stream of you, of some single source, of a monologue. Well, yeah. It's not. Okay. You should not fall unbeknownstly into taking that this that goes on if you're not making some specific effort to think. Then what's going on is in the nature of a dialogue. Now, of course, I keep saying that, but I assume all of you put together, you could look at it as being a whole cast. It's not necessarily the same 2 voices, but there's continually going on that there is a talker and a listener. Either that or you're unconscious. And then, don't be sure, it's just that it's like you hadn't got your radio on. So while not letting yourself accept the dialogue as being a monologue, you should still be aware of the fact that the dialogue is monophonic. That which seems to be the talker and the listener, or that would appear to be the left channel and the right channel, it appears to be stereo, but it's monophonic. They're both coming from the same source. Did we get sticky enough for one night? Well, let's see. Since I asked the questions, I guess I can answer them. Is that sticky enough for one night? All right. Is that sticky enough for a pseudo-holiday? Well, I say pseudo, it being Labor Day, and me thinking how few of you actually labor. So I know a lot of you, though, do some heavy-duty thinking. I know that. I guess that's enough. I had a handful of more things I was going to wrap up and cover finally in time to this, but I guess the night got pretty big as it is tonight. But boy, would you have enjoyed it. It had to do with the overlapping of apparent differences. And if, of course, I could have gotten it that far, I was going to get into the great metaphysical and only partially metaphorical connection between all of this and that dastardly audio phenomenon known as wow and flutter. But now I guess you'll just have to wait.